Hello and welcome to another creative imaging video. This time we're looking at this particular image, how it's been produced using textures, masks, dodging and burning, and I'm going to walk you through it and show you how it's been done. And then we're also going to go into Lightroom, because often what I will do is I'll take an image into Lightroom after I've finished it in Photoshop, and I may do some fine tuning of it. There are some features in Lightroom which I find a little bit easier to use, things like graduated filters and colour adjustments, a little bit easier to use in Lightroom, and so we're going to finish it off in there. So we'll get started. I'm going to switch all these layers off, so you can see what we started with. And we started with a blank document. Basically, I created a 15" by 15" 300 dpi 16-bit document, and into that I've dragged a texture layer, an Adobe paper texture layer. It's like a linen canvas type effect, because I wanted to overlay my images onto this rather than overlay the texture over the image. But you can do it either way, whichever you want. We've got two images in this document. One is the image of the house up near Keld, and the other one is the image of the lapwings just taking flight. I'm going to look at the overlay image first, which has been overlaid using a soft light. Now, at this stage in the image making, don't worry too much about the softness of the image. We can bring through some of the detail later on, and I'll be showing you how to do that using masking and things like that. The second element of the image, which is the bird layer, if we switch off these other layers, you'll be able to see, and I'll switch off that mask too, so that you can see what that image is. That's the image that I brought in, and as you can see in here, I don't want all this part in the image, and so what I did was, if I enable that layer mask there, and I will discuss a little bit more about the layer masks and how they work. But what we're able to do by creating a layer mask at the side of the image here, I was able to erase the out part of the image, so it didn't show through into the final image. And by using a different type of layer blend, you can actually stop that blue part of the image. I don't have to cut it out. I don't have to cut all those birds out. I can just use the layer blend to reduce the opacity of the blue background. And if to just show you what it looks like with a normal blend, and we'll go through down the various blend modes to darken. Sorry, let's get that sorted. To darken and multiply. Hang on, not got it set right. So we go to normal, and we'll scroll down through those blend modes, and you can use the darken modes will actually take out the lighter colours. So we're there with darken. But we're going to switch that off initially because I don't want that to distract us while we're going up through the various layers. The next layer I did was a hue saturation layer. And this again is often these choices are personal. But if we look at the layer, we'll see that I've reduced the saturation and I've just adjusted the hue slightly. And we'll be making some colours pop out later in the layer. Now the next layer is probably the important one that's going to bring some detail and colour through into the image. And what I've done with this layer is I've actually added a mask, and we've started to pull through some detail from below. And I'm just going to show you how we do that by switching that off. And we created a copy of this layer below here, duplicate that layer, and we're going to drag it up above the hue saturation layer. And you can see now that it's actually brought some detail in there, but we also want some of the nice soft detail from below the image. So in order to do that, if you imagine putting something over the top of an image, or a steamy window, and you put something over the top of an image and you start to wash away the steamy window, the image comes through. That's effectively what we're doing a little bit with a layer mask. We're going to add a layer mask by clicking this button here, and what we want to do is we want to reveal some of the layer below. Now in order to do that, we have to make sure that the foreground and background colours are set to black and white. That's the first thing, and we can set them there by clicking that button there, which will automatically set them default black and white. And we can use this little button here to switch between black and white. Now, if you're in a mask and your background of the mask is white, we use a black brush to reveal what's below. If the mask was black, we'd use a white brush to reveal what's below. So just get that in your head. Black and white. Everything must be black and white. So in this case, we're going to take a brush, use the brush tool, and we've got the foreground colour set to black, and we make sure that the mask is selected. And then we'll start with 100% opacity just to show you what happens, and we'll increase the brush size. So if we start to now brush over, what we're actually doing is revealing the layer below. Now, you don't have to do this all at the same opacity. You can try different opacities to do it. You might decide you want to reduce the opacity in certain areas. It's up to you, and it becomes a personal choice how you do it. And we don't want to be too worried, but we want to leave the house alone. We're trying to reveal the details below. Pop that opacity back up again. Trying to reveal the details below, but we're trying to leave the house so that it's still got some definition. And we go all over the image doing this until we're happy with what we've got. But we're basically just pulling through the layers from below. And if you look at the mask, you'll see we're now starting to reveal the layers, and it's turning them dark grey or black. And we can carry on doing this until we're happy with it. I'll go back up to 100%, increase the brush, and we've pulled through some layers from below. So we've gone back to so we've kept the definition in the house, and possibly you might want to miss the fence out and things like that. But we've kept some definition in the house, but we've revealed the misty soft layers below. So once you're happy with that, we can move on from there. So I'm going to do mine, which I did earlier, and delete that one I've just created. And so that's what we've ended up with in mine. We've got the overlay layer. We've got a nice bit of definition in here, and we've got some softness in the rest of the image that we've revealed from below. Now the next layer I produced is a curves layer, mainly because I want to lighten up this bit here, the cottage, and bring a little bit more mid-tones up in that. So I've created a curves layer, and you'll see on here that the mid-tones have been brought up. And if we create a new one, let's switch that one off and create a new one. You see the effect of that. If we create a new one here, and what happens when you create an adjustment layer, it does create you a mask already for you, so you can play about with that mask. And we're going to brighten up the mid-tones, not go too far. You can see them, so mid-tones on there, so we get the house. Now we've brightened up the mid-tones for the whole image, but we only want to be able to lighten up the house. So what we're going to do is we're going to highlight this mask, and we're now going to invert it. We're going to go to Image, Adjustments, and Invert. And that's got the effect of flipping it over, if you like, flipping the image over, or flipping the mask. It's basically masked out all of that curves layer. So what we're going to do is we're now going to reveal that mid-tone lightness that we've put into it by painting over the house, and we paint over it using the white brush. In this case, we reduce it down. So if we now paint over the house, you'll see we're now revealing the house and those light tones. Now this is overemphasized. I would be a lot more careful with this. It's just to show you what you can do. And I'd probably reduce the opacity down a little bit so that it's not quite as obvious. But that's just to show you how you'll then pull that back through. So we're going to delete that layer, and we're going to add in my layer, and you'll see that's the result of that one there. And we're going to take that out. Now, the next layer is what we call a dodge and burn layer. Now, for those of you familiar with film photography, will be familiar with these terms, but basically burning a layer means darkening something, and dodging is lightening something. And to make to make it non-destructive, what we do in Photoshop is we'll show you the result of my dodge and burn layer first. If we flick that on and flick it off, and it looks quite heavy duty, but there's a reason for that, and I'll tell you why. But the best way to do a dodge and burn layer, bear in mind, we can do a dodge layer and we can do a burn layer. You can have them on 2 separate layers. In this instance, I'm just going to show you the one, and I'm going to do it on both. But you can do it using 2 layers if you like, and in case you make any mistakes. So we're going to create a blank layer, and we're going to go to Edit and Fill, and we're going to fill that with a 50% grey. Let that 50% grey grow there, and then we're going to put a soft light on that, the blend mode. And what we can do now with that layer is we can start dodging and burning in specific areas. So if we take the burn tool, which is going to darken, and choose the mid-tones range, we're going to probably drop it down to about 11%. Get the brush up, and we're going to brush over parts of the image, and we're going to sort of darken the mid-tones. And you might want to do it with certain things, not all over the image. Pick out some parts. So we might do it on the wall, we might do it on certain areas, and you can increase or decrease the brush depending on what you want to do. So again, it's up to you to sort of go through and work on that. Once we've done the burning, and you might want to let's just give you a little bit of put a little bit more emphasis on it. You can see how it comes out. You see there, it's darkening the mid-tones, darkening everything up, making things stand out a lot more. And I'm doing it in the foreground and also in the background, so we've got some separation by having the lighter part in the middle. Then we're going to use the dodge tool, and we'll keep to mid-tones, and we'll keep that 15%, and we're going to go around and we're going to lighten up some areas now. So the thing with dodging and burning is if you can lighten up the right areas and darken the dark areas, it adds some depth and definition to an image, and that's useful to know for photography as well if you're editing photographs. But we're just going to go around and we're doing that. And so you'd go around and again, this is a personal thing. You go in and you might want to do certain parts of the image and make things stand out. But the key is to lighten up light parts and darken dark parts. It might sound a bit strange, but really does work, and it really boosts out details in the image. So we'll have a look at what I've done. That's the before and after of the one we've just put on. And you see now how much more depth there is in that. And then we're going to delete that one, and we're going to add mine in. Now that might look quite overemphasized, but when we actually start adding some more texture layers on, some of that will soften a little bit, and you'll see the result of that. So the next layer up is a texture layer, and that's another Adobe paper texture layer. And you can see now that we're really starting to get some bold colour and some bold definition into the image. Now at this stage, I'm going to add in the birds, because I've done all the work on that layer now, or those layers now, and the birds can come in and they're not distracting anymore. Now once we've done that, we're nearly at the final image part in this, and what we'll do now is we'll create a copy of that of the image from all the layers below. Now in Photoshop, on a PC, you use Shift Control Alt E. Now forgive me, but I don't know what it is on a Mac, so you might have to look on your Mac and see what that is. But that basically creates a layer from all the layers below. Now what we're going to finish off with is I'm going to paint in a little bit of colour. And colour is another thing that you can use for emphasis. And in order to put some colour into it, let's just flick that colour layer on and off. You'll see there's some green coming into it round here. And the way we do that is we create a blank layer again. We'd set it as a soft light, and then we'll choose a colour. Now I'll choose this purple colour. Let's go for the purple colour. And do that again. We'll choose the purple colour, and what I want to do is add a little bit of purple into here, almost like purple heather. So if we start to paint now using the paintbrush over this area, you'll see we're getting a nice purple colour. Now that's a bit too strong, and we could If we wanted, reduce the opacity on that brush so it's not quite as strong, and change colour as we go. But it's just to give you an idea of what you can do and how you can add it in. We can also use the opacity on the actual blend layer, so that reduces the opacity, but you get the idea. And the nice thing about doing colour on a layer like that is you can just switch it off or delete it. If you don't like it, you can delete it and start again. So we're going to delete that layer that I've done there, and we'll put the green layer on. Now let's have a look at what that layer looks like on normal, and you see how it looks horrible, but by using the soft light overlay, it softens it, and we can also reduce the opacity on it if we want, if we don't like it too much. So that's the colour. And the final layer is another texture layer, and that's this darkened, it's a coffee shop layer, and it's a darkened bronzy brown layer, which adds a little bit more deep and dark depth into it. And I've added because I don't want the texture to go onto the house, I've added another layer mask, and on that layer mask I've then taken the brush, gone to the black. It's a white layer mask, so we'll go to the brush, the black brush, and we've painted off the texture off the house. I've done that on there, if you can see it. We've painted off the texture. You can't see it. It's quite subtle, but you can't see it on there. And that's basically it in Photoshop. If you want to add any other layers, paint layers and things like that, this is actually just another little layer just to show you. If you get a paint splatter brush, you can actually create a blank layer and throw paint splatters onto it and things like that. But obviously I've not added on this one, but just to show, that was just to show you what you can do. Now we've finished that in Photoshop. What we're going to do now is we're going to bring it into Lightroom. So I've brought the image into Lightroom. And what I would normally do in Lightroom is I would create a virtual copy, because that's my original. And I'll also create a virtual copy. If you never use virtual copies in Lightroom, start using them. They're a great way of, if you want to do a black and white image, but you don't want to change the colour image, create a virtual copy and just make that black and white, so on and so forth. So there's lots of lovely little features in Lightroom that are useful. So I've created a virtual copy of that, and I've made some changes to it. Now, just a little tip in Lightroom: if you're making changes to an image, but then you want to try something different, something new, just go to snapshots. When you've done the image you finish, when you finish your processing, just go to snapshots and create a new snapshot and call it, say, finished processing or finished image. And what that will do is it just creates a snapshot of where this image is and all the settings. So if you actually then reset it, or you decide you want to do something different, but then you mess it up, you play about and you mess it up and you can't get it back quite what you want, if you just click finished image, it takes you back to where you were when you started out. So it's a really useful tool, is this. Now, the only thing I've done here in Photoshop is I've dehazed it slightly because I wanted to soften it overall. I've reduced the vibrance. I've boosted the whites up a little bit. A little bit of shadows lifted at the bottom here. And the main thing I've done, two things. I've shifted the colour slightly. I've shifted the colour towards the colour temperature towards the blue side, the cold side, quite like this, and I actually set it at -17, and I've added a graduated filter. So if we click on the graduated filter, you'll see here, and what I've done with the graduated filter, if I delete that, you'll see I thought it looked a little bit flat in this top right. I wanted it to sort of balance almost the bottom part here where this is dark, and I wanted the top part to be dark. So what I did was I created a graduated filter, and if I just click the reset again, you'll see that the graduated filter, I've filled it with a little bit of blue shading, so it actually adds some colour to that part of the image. And that's it, basically. That sort of sits quite nice with me. I'm quite happy with that, and that's the final image. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope I've explained things okay for you. If there's anything you want to ask me, please feel free. It's just leave something on the group, and I'll get back to you.